Welcome, Life Sciences, to yet another exciting life science lesson. What journey are we on? I know, as I said in the last couple of lessons, it's the plants, and you guys are, oh, we hate plants. Get over it. Right, we're looking at the last in our plant series, and remember we're looking at plant biodiversity. We looked at the whole evolution of plants, where you looked at ferns, and you looked at moss, and you looked at pine, and you looked at angiosperms, which are flowering plants. And then last time we looked at the lesson on plant reproduction, asexual reproduction versus sexual reproduction. And we were looking at the whole concept of food, because remember, plants, we eat plants. And today we are continuing on that section, and we're going to concentrate on the flower, right? As we said in our last series, the flower is the reproductive organ, right, of plants, and we're going to concentrate on that concept. Now, the concept, as I said to you, is when we think of a flower, right, we often think of something that's pretty, that's maybe in our garden, in our house, or when we drive along the roads, the beautiful cosmos that's out there. But just remember, the concept we are looking at is ultimately going to be food, right? Food. A flower can produce a fruit, a flower can produce a seed, and seeds can grow into crops that feed our country. Okay guys, so what are we going to concentrate on today? We're going to look at the structure of the flower. Throughout the lessons you would have seen I've often referred to the flower. Today we're actually going to look at the concept of the flower and what the flower entails when it comes to, right, specifically producing a seed. And we're also going to look at the concept today of pollination, right? How do flowers, right, how they adapted to their pollinators and what is pollination. And then the seed, the end result of this reproduction, sexual reproduction, a seed can grow into a new plant, and we're going to look at a concept of seed banks, of actually storing seeds to make sure we keep this biodiversity, that if something should happen, we've basically got a fallback. Once again, there are quite a few new terms that you're going to know each time, right? When we look at the structure, you're going to see the terminology, right? Pay attention. There is a list of them each section that we do it. Listen when I speak. Do those terms come up? And if you're not sure, just check your notes or your textbooks just to make sure that you understand what the terms are. All right, guys, so when we first started our biodiversity, when we looked at evolution, we looked at the concept of different groups of flowers. And the one group of flowers that was probably the newest, all right, was the angiosperms. But they were also the most complex, because an angiosperm referred to a plant that produced a flower. And that is the structure today that we're going to look at. So what is a flower? When we look at plants, it's got organs, it's got roots, it's got stems, it's got leaves, and some plants, all right, are going to produce a flower, and those are the angiosperms. And that is the structure we're going to look at today. Right, so guys, when we look at this concept of what a flower is, let's have a look at the things that a flower needs to have. Let me get my color going over here. Right, now the first thing, as we said, is that they're the reproductive organs, the sexual reproductive organs in a plant. And when we talk about sexual, that implies that there is a male and a female. Okay, so that is really important. So as I said, bringing to the next one, the flower must have male and female structures on it. It might be that they're on the same flower, different flower, but there must be a male and there must be a female. All right, what do male and females have to do? They have to produce a sex cell or a gamete. That's what we call the sex cells. So the different organs, all right, are going to produce what we call these different sex cells. And what these sex cells need to do is they need to fuse. They need to join, because ultimately they're going to make something called a seed, which is going to give rise to a new plant. But what flowers do need to do, most of them, not all of them, these gametes, they need to get around from one flower to another. And that brings us into the concept of pollinators. Pollinators are going to take, all right, these gametes from the male to the female. Now, what do I mean about the male and the female? I am going to draw a flower for you. Now, you'll see in the top corner there's a bit of a diagram over there, but I'm going to draw what you need to, or the parts that are important when it comes to a flower. Okay, so don't laugh at my drawing skills, but I am going to show you what you need to do. When we talk about a flower, we talk about whorls, and whorls means different layers. I don't know if any of you have taken a flower and say, she loves me not, whatever, and you pull them all apart. That's basically what we are going to look at. Right, so we're going to work from the outside to the inside. So there we go, let's put a little stalk over there. Now, when we think of a flower, I want you to think of maybe a rose. And when a rose is in bud, it's got these little green leaves, all right, that enclose the bud. And we call these sepals, all right? They're little green leaves, and when the flower is in bud, what they do is they're going to protect the flower. And as the flower comes up, they open, and they're there, and they're nice and green. Okay. Now the next part of the flower, it's probably the one we think of the most. Flowers are usually lovely and colorful, and we recognize that color. They are the petals. Now, very often we refer to the petals as a corolla of petals. So it's like, all right, a term saying all the petals at once. But these petals are nice and bright. And why they're nice and bright is because they're going to attract the pollinators. Right, what are the pollinators? Let me quickly just fix that. All right, over there. So let me get my spelling all nice and ready. Pollinators. There we go. Those are my bees and my butterflies and my birds, all those kind of animals that are going to take this concept called pollen. Now they come to what do a flower needs? It needs a male and it needs a female. So here, one of the whorls, now I'm going to have a look over here. If you look at the female, or the male, you're going to see these long stalks with something at the end. Right. This is called the filament, and this is called the anther. And they've got a nice together, they make, well, there's the male plant. Have a look. Stamen. All right, it's the male part of the plant. And what does this produce? I don't know if you've ever seen, I'll show you a picture just now. The male produces pollen, which is the male sex cell, okay, which is the male sex cell. Now, if we have a look in the middle, right in the center, we're going to have the female. And she's all nice and curvy, and she looks like this. Now, what she has over here, at the top, she's got a sticky stigma. Right, now the pollen can stick to the top over there. This is called the style. And this part over here, the big part, is called the ovary. Now, inside the ovary, you're going to see is the female sex cell, and they are called ovules. Right, so if we go back to our previous note, all right, what did we say that flowers needed to have? A male and female structures, and each of them needed to produce a sex cell. And the flower also needed to be able to attract pollinators. Right, so this diagram of the flower, I'm going to put a nice bright one up there that I haven't drawn. You must be able to recognize it as a flower, and you must be able to label it. All right, so it's one of the things that you need to be able to recognize a flower, and I can label all the different parts, which is the male, which is the female, okay, and the petals. All of that's going to play a role in the sexual reproduction. Okay, so guys, have a look here. I've tried to put nice pictures on so that you can understand the concept. So next time you go and have a look at the flower, right, have a look here. This is the male part. There is the anther, and there is the pollen. Can you see all the little yellow things? All right, that is the male gamete. That is going to be, all right, the pollen, and that is the stamen. Okay, now when it comes to the female, they have a collective term. I just want to write over here what we usually call the female. There's two words for it. I like the first one, pistil, because that's what we are. We're very fiery. Another word you might sometimes have is carpal, but carpal with an E, because if you say with an L, remember those are the bones of your wrist. All right, so when we have the female gamete, the female reproductive, she's made of all of those. Guys, these are the ovules. All right, can you see these are the female egg cells inside the ovary, and they are ready for the pollen, all right, for fertilization to occur. Look at the flowers. Why are the flowers nice and bright? Why do we use nice bright colors? Right, we need to attract, it's advertisement. We need to attract pollinators. Come here, bird, come here, butterfly, insect, even bats. All right, lots of animals are pollinators, and the bright color flower often is an advertisement for them to come. Remember, what do I want? I need to take the pollen from the male to the female, and they're going to do the work for me. Right, so there's this whole concept that we need to understand called pollination. And what pollination is, as I said to you, is we're looking at sexual reproduction. Right, I'm going to just change to a bit of a brighter color over there. And when we look at sexual reproduction, right, very often the male must travel to the female. Okay, and that's exactly what's going to happen here. So look at my diagram. Here's my male pollen. I want to get him to another flower, preferably. So I need to get the pollen from the male, and I want it to land on the sticky stigma of another flower. That process is called pollination. So it's the act of transferring pollen grains from the anther, not from flower to flower. Be specific. From the anther, which is the male, of the flower to the female stigma. Don't say female, because this whole structure is the female. And we don't take it to the whole structure. We just take it to the top of that sticky stigma. Okay, guys, now two concepts I just want you to understand. Self-pollination is when the flower pollinates itself. Look here. It goes from the anther of its male to the stigma of its female. We don't want that to occur. Although it does occur, all right, we don't really want to have it happening. Why? This whole concept of genetic diversity. If the same plant keeps on producing the same genes all the time, it's kind of like inbreeding, and we're not getting other genes, and that's a concept that we really want to do. Biodiversity, genetic diversity. Right, we want the genes of the same species of plant, but I want a different one. Not the same, all the guys on my plant. I want one from one on a different plant. Okay, so usually what will happen is the plant can come up with ways that maybe the female, all right, is mature before the male, or vice versa. It usually can come up with ways in which self-pollination doesn't occur. It's not like the end of the world, but technically we don't want it to occur. What do we want to occur? Cross-pollination, okay? We want the genes from one flower to cross over to a new flower. Yes, they must be the same ones, right? But we want the anther of one flower on one plant to move to the stigma of the anther on another plant. Okay, guys, we're going to take a quick break and we'll see you in just a bit.